Okay, so what happens when the percentage that we're calculating is a percentage of something that's not 1? So at GMAT Panda, what we call that thing that we're splitting is the base of the percentage. And percentages tend to be very sneaky in the GMAT for many reasons. One big mistake that people make is that they get confused between the share, the base, and the percentage share. Now, let's see a little video to explain that in a bit more detail. So, let's say that we're splitting a group of 240 people. So that's what we call the base. It's the whole rectangle in this case. And we want to take 70% of that group. That 70% is the percentage share. And how many people does that represent is going to be 240 times 0.7. So the 0.7 represents the 70%. Remember that 70% is like 70 out of 100, so 70 divided by 100, which is 0.7. 240 is the base, and so the answer is going to be 168. So that is the share, so that's the actual number of people that we end up with once we've taken 70% of the base. So another way of thinking about this is the base is the whole thing, what you're splitting. The share as a percentage is something that's always relative to the base, whereas the share is a number that is true, like even if you don't have the context of what the base is. Okay, so 168 people means something out of context. Okay, 70% of the group, well, we don't know how big the group is. It doesn't actually mean that much, right? Because it could be 70% of the whole country, or 70% of the city, or 70% of your neighborhood. And all these three things mean completely different things. Now, part of the challenge in percentage questions in the GMAT is identifying what you have and what you don't have. So it's very important when you have a percentage calculation to make that you identify what is the base, what is the percentage share, and what is the share. And you identify which of those ones you have and which is the one that you need to calculate. So for example, in this case, we have the share and we have the base, and we need to calculate the percentage share. So the base is 300. So in this case, it's a group of 300 people. And we're selecting 90 of those people. And we want to work out what percentage share that represents. The way to do that, while using this formula, is to divide 90 by 300. And we get from that 0.3, which is the same as 30%. Mathematically, the two equations we've seen are equivalent. The key is to identify which two elements do we have. Do we have the base and the percentage share, and we need to calculate the share? Or do we have the share and the base, and we need to calculate the percentage share? Now, in some occasions in the GMAT, you have to work out the base, and they give you the percentage share and the share. Those cases are rarer, and people tend to make fewer mistakes on them, in my experience. However, when you're working out what is what, be very careful to not just rely on the units. Why? Because it's not because something has a percentage at the end, that it's automatically a percentage share. That could also be the share or the base. Yes, I know, it's starting to become a bit complicated. So let's say that we're surveying some part of the population. Maybe it's for a local election, and we understand that out of the 100% of respondents, 40% of them rank, let's say, economy as the number one criteria among their concerns. So 40% of the surveys think the economy is the most important part of the election. And then what we are told is that 75% of that 40% are intending on voting for candidate X. Now, in this case, the 40% is, so it's a percentage share of the initial rectangle, but then it becomes the base of the second percentage calculation. And notice that in this case, that 40%, it may look like it's a percentage share because it's got a percentage at the end. But what we would do here is we would calculate 75% of 40%. So in this case, we would have the percentage share, which is in a percentage, and the base that is also in a percentage, and we would get the share, which would be, in this case, 30%. All right? So in this case, all three have a percentage at the end, so you can't just rely on the unit to identify what is what.